All right, I think we are live. Welcome. It is Thursday, January 14th, 2016 at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, and this is Marketing Live. I am your host, Amy Jorgensen. On today's broadcast, Berklee's marketing leadership will share the struggles and successes of an ongoing brand unification initiative to assimilate disparate brands, degree programs, institutes, and other programmatic offerings into a coherent brand experience to a wildly diverse audience. Marketing Live is part of a Higher Ed Live network, offering viewers direct access to the best and brightest minds in education. Live webcasts allow viewers to share knowledge and participate in discussions around the most important issues in the industry. All episodes of Marketing Live are free and accessible in the video archives at higheredlive.com and in podcast format on iTunes. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. I'd like to welcome our three guests today. We have Janelle Browning. Welcome. She is the Director of Marketing and External Affairs at the Berklee College of Music. Welcome, Janelle.
Thank you.
We also have Megan Tracy, the Associate Director of Social Media and Online at the Marketing Berklee College of Music. Welcome, Megan.
Thank you.
Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, exactly. It's perfect, Megan.
Awesome. And we also have Sarah Fleshman, is an online marketing communications manager at the Berklee College of Music. Did I butcher your last name, Sarah?
It totally works.
Great. So for all those of you that are watching, you can ask any questions on Twitter using hashtag HigherEdLive. So, and I'll do my best to try and grab some of the questions as they come in. So diving into this, who owns the brand at your institution and what is the brand architecture?
So I will take that one. Berklee is a music school in Boston. It's actually the largest contemporary music school in the world. So we have 4,000 undergrad and graduate students full-time on campus in Boston. And then we also have a campus in Spain, in Valencia, Spain, where we have a couple hundred graduate students and some study abroad students doing undergrad from here. We also have undergraduate and degrees and online courses in our online school, which is located here in Boston, but it's online, so it's pervasive. And then we have summer programs at both Boston and Valencia campuses. So there are a lot of people with their hands on the brand. As far as owning it, we sort of think of that as the way that it faces outwards. So we have external affairs, which is made up of, among a few other departments, also communications and marketing. So we work in communications and marketing. And then we also have enrollment, which is enrollment and admissions, right? So those people are the primary overseers of the brand. We have some sub-brands that we work with really closely, our Valencia campus, Berklee Online, just to make sure that we're all sort of working together. But as far as the brand management goes, that's how it works.
Excellent. So how, with all these different areas, I mean, literally across the globe, how do you establish a case for brand unification?
Well, so we saw a really strong case for unification because the brand was growing so exponentially, right? So we have this huge online school, we have the school in Spain. The strongest case for brand unification is really around audience accessibility, right? And we have so many different audiences. We've got internal, faculty, staff, and students. We've got external parents, donors, staff, or parents, donors, alumni, the general public, right? People who come just to buy concert tickets. So those audiences can be so broad and varied, and the brand can be really confusing for them if we're not all speaking the same language and talking about it the same way. Strong brands are easy to find, they're easy to interact with, we're more recognizable, but it's also way less expensive. I'll get into some of the details later about the money we were spending, but it turns out not having everything lined up was actually costing us a lot of money when it came down to how we were paying for advertising because we were bidding against ourselves. We'll get more into the specifics of that later.
Wow, that's fascinating. So what are the top level brand components that we should establish as a guide for departments?
Okay, so you want to think about, it's super basic, right? Logo, fonts, the language and style of the words that you use. So we're really specific. We have our own style guide that we've developed. Imagery types, like what types of photography do you use? And that'll help actually decide how you're shooting things, whatever. But also just best practices. Right? Like what are the best ways to, how do we send out an email? And what are the components of that? Like making sure that we're all in a line doing the same thing at the same time.
Excellent. So with some of those brand components, as you guys were going through the process and developing it, did you have a bunch of folks, arguing along the way about the best practices and the right colors and the right language? And like, how did you make sure that folks were kind of bonded together?
Well, I mean, so the colors have been established for a long time. I mean, I've been here 15 years now, and we've had the same specific brand colors. We've gone through a couple of rebrands over those years, and we hire an agency, and we do all kinds of research with, like, we survey the faculty, the students, the staff, the alumni. We reach really broadly to make sure that we have really good buy-in. And then we have a really strong communications office that just makes sure that we use the brand appropriately. So everybody agrees on those things. And then luckily for us, there's institutional buy-in that the communications office has the final word on how things get used and what we say.
And I would say that rolling it out becomes this slow process too, to get buy-in, where people know it's happening because we're focus grouping and we're surveying. And then when we start to roll it out, because we just went through a big rebrand, you do department by department. You do road shows to different areas and students, and you show everybody kind of one at a time, to get buy-in as you go, so that by the time you're showing it to the public, nobody's taken off guard at the school itself.
Yeah, as with any big change, it's a lot of relationship building and over-educating and over-communicating. So, we took the time to make sure that everyone felt like they were getting their individual questions answered, and it wasn't just one big email that was sent out to the whole community. It was meetings with this person and meetings with this person, and understanding where they were coming from, and and what they had invested in the past that you were kind of undoing. So really keeping in mind what they were experiencing and all the unknowns that scare them, and trying to figure out how to communicate to them in a way that makes them feel better and like you're all on the same side.
Well, and we developed the brand with an eye toward understanding that we have all these sub-brands that need to be incorporated and understood as well. So it wasn't just, this is Berklee and only Berklee. It was also, here are the component pieces. So it was developed with that in mind.
Excellent. So what are the steps for unification?
All right, so initially, we thought it was important to identify our brand organizers, and Megan came up with this term. I really like it. You think sort of about like a union, right? And you have the organizers, these are people who are getting all this work done and working together toward a common goal. You want to identify the marketing leaders for each sub-brand, and it's not necessarily the folks at the top of the food chain. That was really important for us to understand. You want strategic thinkers who have the authority to execute a plan, because it's not just about theory. We're not just like, here's what we would do if we were doing something. It's here's what we're doing. But you also want team players with the ability to advocate for their area's priorities, but also keep the big picture in mind. When you're assembling that team, you want to really carefully align the roles and priorities for everybody involved. You want to make sure where those things overlap and where they diverge. You also want to build agreement on overarching goals, because that'll help focusing on the commonalities helps increase the likelihood of buy-in from those people. And then you want to use data to support the policies. This is one of the best things that we've learned to do. It's not good enough just to tell a story about how great it would be to work together. Like, show how that makes a difference. And again, we'll get into more of the specifics of that when we get into the money stuff. But it makes a huge difference for us to combine our efforts and leverage those rather than be working in these separate silos. And then you want to energize your team by recognizing their agency. If you give people the keys and give them a sense of ownership, a lot can happen. And then unifying social was the next thing that we touched on, which is Megan.
Oh yeah. I mean, we were gonna talk about how to unify your social media presence. We found this to be a great place to start. We actually started our process in unifying our social media strategy around 08, 09, way back when it was really just Facebook pages and Myspace accounts. It tends to be a great place, though, I think, to really start identifying these brand organizers, because it's a lot of places where sometimes even lower level or definitely mid-level employees are granted a lot of agency to act and do their own thing. It's not something where there's a lot of people on top of it saying you have to do this, you have to do that. Quite often it's somebody at a lower level where they're saying, okay, start up we need an Instagram presence, we need a Twitter presence. So because it was sometimes even like a lesser known or lower priority, it was a great place to kind of find these people who are representing the brand, get them all in the room, and all these people are kind of hungry for some kind of structure. Everybody feels like they're operating on their own. So you start getting people in the same room and everyone's really excited about doing that kind of work together.
So out of curiosity, I didn't mean to interrupt you on this, but are those the folks that you use to help identify the brand organizers, like those ones that were working on social media?
Exactly.
They're like the most passionate and.
Those are the brand organizers, because I guess what we're kind of saying with this is that the brand organizers are these people who have the power to represent the brand. And so it's not just people at the top who are saying you have to do blah, 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 blah. It's the people who are actually doing this. And I think social is actually one of the most important places to start, because it's it's really the most public. You know, it's out there all the time. People are tweeting about your brand and talking about it. And it's out there anyway. There are people representing your college, whether or not you're getting them in touch with best practices and meeting with them. So we really started with that, pulling all those people in the same room. Like I said, started back in 08, 09. These days, we meet regularly. I lead a group of about 30 to 40 brand organizers from various departments throughout the college, different offices, different sub-brands. And we meet, we talk best practices. It's a very collaborative effort. We do have a social media strategy that we all came up with as a team. Again, it's not something that external affairs or marketing is handing down. We are really empowering all these users and saying, you know, we all know these platforms and we all know our brand. So how do we work together to represent this brand on social?
How do you build a social media strategy that's for all of these very, you know, different brands? So for example, like you have the main university brand that's probably got the goals of increasing admission, and then perhaps you have one of the departments that's trying to increase the, I don't know, like a totally different separate goal, like perhaps concert tickets, I don't know. But how do you get them all to agree on a strategy and implementation when there's very different needs?
This was actually such a great exercise for the group. I would highly recommend it for any group of people who want this kind of buy-in. We used as a framework SWOT analysis, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And you know, I kind of brought in this framework to them and explained it. And then we went through it as a group. We spent several months on it back in 2010. And this group of, at that point, I want to say it was 15 to 20 people. We'd talk about it as a group. We'd go away and talk with our areas. And we identified all the strengths of what was already going on for social media. We identified a lot of the weaknesses. We talked about the opportunities and kind of social media at large and higher ed at large and a lot of the threats. And we came back with that together. And with that, we came up with something that everyone agreed on. We came up with a mission statement. And this piece that is our kind of social media strategy. And some of it included things that they wanted me to take back to kind of these, you know, the communications department, the marketing department, the web team. We want a directory on the website. We want people to be able to find us more easily. So it worked both ways. But it was a really galvanizing thing for the group, and something I would totally do again in managing a group like that. Because again, it was not coming in and saying, okay, everybody, this is our social media strategy. It just has decided. Everybody go do it. And that means that going from there, you have this document to refer back to, saying, well, this is what we did. The same thing with our best practices, actually, and they're always changing as we add new accounts and things like that. We're just dabbling with Snapchat, so we're going to need some Snapchat best practices soon. Don't have them yet. If someone else does, please send them my way. But the fact that we all do this as a group, and that means if there's somebody new, somebody starts up a Facebook page, Snapchat account, what have you, for the department, and they're not part of this group, they very quickly see that there is a group that's talking about it and that's very public at the school, and they want to be a part of it. It's become, I think in the beginning, it was a little bit like social media police, like, you have an account, you have to come talk to me. And it's the opposite. It's, I want to start up a page for this department. I'm told you're the one to talk to. What do I do? And I can give them this download of all these documents, the strategy, and invite them to the meetings. And immediately you're part of this team that's developing the strategy as you go along.
So I love that you actually brought up some of the policing component, because one of the biggest things I've seen at universities that's a challenge is the governance. You know, how do you make sure that you don't have some, you know, tiny little department or one class making their own Facebook page, or do you allow them to do that? Like, so what does that document help provide the foundation for governance and try to help control it?
It absolutely does. And I think that to begin with, we defined early on that we do not regulate, as marketing, we don't regulate anything that students do. If student affairs wants to, that is their thing, and we have, you know, there are always going to be issues like that showing up. But and those will often come to me, complaints about whether it's bullying or something inappropriate, but those are student affairs issues. Those are not marketing issues. If it's not being said by a representative of the college, as if it's the college speaking, it's not our issue. So we define that early on. I always say it's as important to define what you don't do as it is to define what you do. And so we do take charge of is what people from the college are saying on behalf of the college. But and in terms of governing it, I think that one of the most effective things I've been able to tell to people as I work with them is we really emphasize reaching your correct audience, right? Like getting the right message to the right person at the right time is something I hear Janelle say about 3 times a week to people, and you can't say it enough. But using kind of that to underscore everything, I've said many times these days, I'm not in the business of shutting down an account that because it has Berklee in the title, because it's not using the right colors. At this point, there's so much out there that is done correctly that people are parts of our group representing Berklee, it really does drown out the few things that don't. But what I am really concerned with is people spending tons of time and tons of energy and money, sometimes and resources, to not reach an audience they really want to reach. If someone really wants to reach students and they're putting all this energy into doing something that no one's looking at, they're far better served, and they know that, to come be part of our group, come to these meetings, say, hey, I have this event I want to get out to students. Here's 5 different accounts that are already reaching a lot of students on a daily basis. They'll share it with you. And so using that approach, like really driving home that audience thing, has been highly effective.
And so I have to ask real quick before we dive onto the next topic. You talked about Myspace. Are you guys on Myspace?
No. I bring up Myspace because I think I have a job a lot because of Myspace. When I got hired in 2007 to be the internet marketing manager, because that was a job, internet marketing manager. It was a lot of different things, and one of it was a brand new job. One of it was, I don't know if we even called it social media back then. I can't remember, but it was manage our Myspace and Facebook presence. There was no Twitter, certainly no Instagram. And we had a Myspace page that some student in media, a student employee had started up and had graduated, so it was just sitting there. But for about 2 years there, I did maintain and work on it. And then, within a year or two, it became clear we did not need that anymore. So it was something that I didn't have to put any resources into. But that's always an interesting thing, like when new properties, and this is another thing we talk about as a group. When is a property big enough? Like I said, Snapchat's the one we're talking about a lot these days. When is it big enough that we need to be on it and appropriate for us? And that's one of the biggest things that comes up in these groups. Like, do we still need blah? Do we still need Vine, for example? A lot of people started up Vine accounts. And do we need such and such yet? And that's something we all talk about. I mean, honestly, when I started this job, I was probably more in touch. These days, I hire work studies to talk to me about what we should actually be doing and on which properties, which ones are going to stick around, which ones are they actually using.
Very cool. I think the most creative, bizarre social media I've seen is Bruce Floyd at the University of Florida made a Tinder account for Albert in Alberta, which I love, for the mascots. And it's absolutely hilarious. And it's the most fantastic thing. I'm like, why are we not doing this?
I know Van's doing that. That's fantastic. Actually, before we leave Myspace, and I think it's actually a nice tie-in, one thing we learned from the Myspace is this whole lesson about social media, that you don't actually own your fans and followers there. You don't. You think you do. I remember in those days being playing in bands this time, and a lot of us started to think you didn't really need a website. You just need a Myspace page. And then everyone stopped using Myspace, and suddenly you lost all those people. If you hadn't bothered to get them on a mailing list or get them to your website, you no longer had them. And I think that that's one thing that we drive home a lot in the social media meetings, is the fact that having a strong web presence is really important. And that you start from there, and then you push this content outwards to people, but you have to have something that you actually own to bring them all back to.
So I think that's a really fantastic transition. Nice. Diving into the web presence stuff, I have found at all the universities I've worked at that is one of the hardest things to do, is unifying the web presence, either with, even just colors and format, and making sure there's a universal navigation up at the top. So no matter what site you're on, you can always go back to the main university site. So What are some of the challenges you faced with unifying your web presence at your university, and how did you kind of go above that?
Well, so back in 2012, this is when we really started focusing on unifying the web. Before that, communications was the only team that had access to our website, our marketing website, and departments could email them content, but it might take a long time. They got totally disillusioned. So a lot of them started their own websites. But the problem is these are academic departments that maybe have a maximum of one support staff, and that support staff may not even have any technical experience. So, you know, they went all out and they created a new website, but then a lot of the websites just sat there for, some of them even like 10 or 15 years. They were basically vintage websites. And the problem with that is students Google everything. So you have a prospective student and they're looking up some Berklee program because they're interested in coming here, and they're seeing all these rogue sites that have completely outdated information. They don't look like your school. They have completely different messages, and they can't even find your real website. So you want to make sure that when students are looking for you, they're able to find the message that your team has worked so hard to create. So we did a huge site audit to figure out what was out there. We knew it would be pretty scary, but it was even scarier than we imagined. It was hundreds and hundreds of websites that hadn't been touched in a really long time. And so we worked to figure out who owned all of those sites, and that helped us figure out what the new website should look like. And based on kind of what that landscape looked like, we decided that we wanted our main website to we were going to integrate the public-facing site with the internal site. So now we have a main site, berklee.edu, that is for prospective students and parents, but it also has a login. So our alumni, students, staff, and faculty can all log in and get access to all sorts of extra information. So to do that, we had all these departments that had their own sites, and we had to shift them away from that and onto ours. So it took a while. It took about a year from when we decided to do this until we actually launched. And we identified content managers in each of the departments. We had about 300, now we have even more. And we trained them, we overeducated them, we over-communicated. And one of the challenges is that a lot of them had started their own websites and they were really invested in them, even if they didn't update them. So you have to convince them that what you're offering is better than what they have, because we didn't want it to come across as, we're the brand police, you must close your website and move over to ours. We really want it to feel like a partnership. We're offering you all these awesome tools. We can offer you the technical support that you can't offer yourselves because you just don't have the resources. And so we built the site basically for these content managers and made it as easy as possible for them to go in the same direction that our brand was going in rather than the opposite way. So we had all of them work on the website, and it launched back in 2013. There was definitely some growing pains because a lot of the departments didn't have anyone who was dedicated to anything related to marketing and communications. A lot of the time it's a guitar professor who's updating the website. Sometimes it's support staff who's never updated a website in their life. So the training portion is really important, and also showing them that they can do it and providing ongoing support. So, we don't just meet with them once and then say, okay, you're all set. We always provide extra support. Megan and I do office hours where they can come talk to us about pretty much anything related to marketing. They talk about social media, they'll talk about web questions, anything related to marketing. So they can come and have a working session. We're really accessible, and I think that's very important. We also wanted to make sure that it felt personal. So it wasn't just one office saying, okay, you have to move over to our website now. We really worked with them to develop tools that their departments needed to accomplish their goal. And one of the benefits is that now everybody's on the same site. So there is this feeling of collaboration, and people really have started to understand that there is a benefit to being on the main marketing website. And we've retained some structure and flexibility because we have a moderation workflow where they can create their own content and they can publish it internally, but anything that's going to show up publicly is going to go through the proofing team and communications. So communications still gets to oversee all of the public-facing content, but departments really get to feel ownership in what they're creating. So they get to have a voice in all of this.
Awesome. And I have to say, I love your site. What did you guys build it in?
It's Drupal.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. So
We'll pass that along.
They're always happy to hear that.
and I love that you talked a little bit about how, it's almost a way of selling them and trying to show them about how, you're going to be essentially making their jobs easier and all the different tools. And one of the things that you spoke about before, I'd love to dive into is the costs of how much everything was when everything was kind of doing their own thing. So can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
Well, the costs, Janelle will talk about spending with advertising later. With the websites, a lot of them had free sites. They were using like WordPress and any other free things, or they were paying for their own servers. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily all that cheaper to have our own site, because now we have to have a lot more servers. There's a lot more maintenance that goes into it. We have a dedicated team that's working on the site. But in terms of staff resources, we have a team of professionals that's in charge of the website and maintaining it and building new features. And other areas, when they're updating their site, we've made it as easy and accessible as possible for them, so they don't have to spend all this time learning all the technical stuff when we actually have a team that does that full time.
That's fantastic. Someone trying to break in?
Possibly.
Great. So can we dive into some of the advertising spending that y'all have spoken about before?
Absolutely. So when we thought about unifying our spending, we basically needed to figure out what we're spending our money on and whether it's worth paying someone else outside to do that work, or if we should bring it in-house. So it breaks down basically Google search, absolutely worth our money, right? Paying for AdWords. And we have a guy that we work with, and he's awesome. And so he runs our AdWords campaigns, and Megan works really closely with him. We also have Facebook display, so our display advertising. And when I say Google, I'm talking about all the pre-rolls we do for YouTube, all of our Google Display Network stuff, and then the AdWords paid search stuff. And then we have Facebook display. So many of our demographic are on Facebook, so it makes sense to use that as a really targeted tool. And then we were paying an ad agency to both come up with our campaigns and execute them. But we found that because, we're a small school, so we didn't really have a big enough budget to make it worth their while to really sink their teeth in and do a lot of really close work with us. It was more a set it and forget it kind of situation. And we enjoyed working with them, but it wasn't actually enough bang for our buck. So we ended up bringing most of it in-house. So we do that here. It helps with the identification of our brand organizers, the director level folks who have budget oversight. So we all got together. We work really closely with the director of admissions, marketing, the director of marketing for Berklee Valencia, and then the folks at online, because it turns out, this is what I was telling you earlier, we were bidding, Berklee bricks and mortar, so Berklee in Boston was bidding against Berklee Valencia, was bidding against Berklee Online. So we were driving up all this costs for the search terms for ourselves, right? So every time we're like bidding on this stuff, we're paying more because someone down the street who works for the same place is also bidding on it. So
how did you figure that out?
It's sort of embarrassing now that we notice that we do it. We don't do it anymore. We day part everything. I had a conversation with the guy who was running the campaigns for Berklee Online, and because they spend a lot more money on advertising than we do, because they have a different demographic. Like, we're looking for like longer term, like people coming here for school. They're selling courses, so it was a completely different model. But he was like, oh yeah, you guys are bidding against each other at exactly the same time of day on exactly the same terms, which doesn't even make sense because their audience is much more grown-ups who have day jobs. So those people are at work looking at courses they might want to take, whereas we're looking at prospects who are basically looking after school. So we were able to coordinate, and we pulled Berklee Valencia in too. And we were able to coordinate, and we don't compete against ourselves anymore. We look at all the admission cycles, we look at the times of year and the times of day and the places in the world, right? Like, we're not advertising for graduate programs in Valencia in the US as much as we are in Europe, because the market is more in Europe. So that helped.
If you ever need to make a case for unification, it will save you money. It's a really, really good one.
Exactly, and a lot of money, and then we can put that money into other things. And being able to pull the other directors in and say, okay, I know you're spending this much money per year on search. What if you could spend this much less and still get better results, right? That's something they can take to that. That's the whole brand organization thing. Like they can take that to their boss and be like, hey, if we cooperate, we can actually all do this together and it'll cost less money. Yeah, basically we have these common goals, audiences, marketing platforms, and it all works better.
Excellent. And that's really smart. I mean, like you said before, showing them data that you can't argue. You can't argue with numbers. This is how it's going to save you money. This is how it's going to get you more viewers. This is, you know, that's excellent. Great. So with the whole unification process, with bringing in, you know, social and bringing in the web and making sure all the advertising is all together and all of that, what are some of the challenges that you've encountered and you know, so that some of us are trying to go through that. So we're going through it for the first time at the University of Virginia. So what are some of the things that you saw were challenges that we could perhaps try to be ready for or try to, you know, go around if at all possible? And how did
the social end, the biggest challenge is just the sheer volume because it's free to do and so many people are doing it. It's just keeping tabs on it. And the only way to do, well, I would say two things that help with that are one, establishing this kind of central authoritative group, not central authority because no one but authoritative group such that it's very clear that I want to do this. Oh, here are the people I should talk to. But that's obviously the biggest challenge. And we're actually right now starting to dabble a bit with doing more social listening in general, just to hear who's talking about us that we don't know about, using some paid products to do that. But I would say that that's actually on my end, on the social end. It's less about getting the buy-in once they know about you and you know about them, but it's just keeping tabs on it.
Yeah.
Sure. So with the web, I think part of it is that you're never going to be done. You launch a website, it doesn't mean that you've finished everything, and you have to be willing to invest more resources and time and money long term because it's this living, breathing thing. You're always going to need to update it. You're always going to need a team that's maintaining it and people who are creating content. So making sure that higher ups understand that this is a long-term investment and not just something that you wrap up with a bow and put in a closet. I think another thing is that you really need the right people and you need them to be on board with what you're doing. So one of the things that is really hard is people like having control over what they're doing, and when you come in and you say they can't do it anymore, and this is applicable to anything, not just the web, they really push back. And we didn't want them to see this as an antagonistic relationship. We didn't want them to see us as the brand police. Yes, we oversee the brand, but we're not coming in and just kind of wrapping everybody's knuckles. So one of the things that we've really thought about is kind of positioning ourselves as experts as opposed to just the authority. And I really feel like the whole culture has changed, and this is with the whole brand rollout. A lot of people now look to us and they ask us for best practices. They're excited about it and they actually care about doing things well. Whereas before, I think they weren't really thinking about it. It was just get it done and cross it off the list. And so now people are being a lot more deliberate about it and really trying to work with us and figure out the best way they can do what they do. Because one of the things that I think they've realized, and it has taken several years, is that we have everybody's best interests at heart here. It's, you know, we're not just pursuing our own agenda. We're all trying to position Berklee as well as we can. And as soon as they realize that, then they sort of they come around and want to work with us, and it becomes more of a partnership than just us barging in.
I would say
as brand experts.
Sorry?
I'm sorry, how did you guys establish yourself as brand experts? You said that was one of the things that you did to have them kind of come to you for expertise. How did you establish that? Just say, I am the expert. And they're like, okay.
A lot of it is just educating them. And when I tell people about best practices, I try not to just say, we do it this way. I'll explain why we set up emails in a certain way and try to get them to understand the user experience. And I'll sometimes, depending on who it is, sometimes I'll show data that backs it up. Sometimes I'll share other reports that show what kind of the industry best practices. And I do a lot of explaining the why. And I think that helps people understand that I'm not saying this because I want to be bossy. I'm saying it because I want all of us to just do better work. And so I think that working with them like that and just being really transparent about it they learn a lot. And also making yourself accessible, because the more they feel like they can ask questions and really learn from you, and it is okay if you say, I don't know, that's a totally fine answer, but being able to kind of work through it with them or point them to other resources, that gets them to respect you and see you as someone that they actually want to work with, as opposed to just this authority figure who's saying yes, no, that sort of thing.
I think Sarah's so good about being kind to people when they ask questions.
Kindness is important.
It is, and it seems sort of ridiculous to say about being at work, but it really, like, people know that they can call her and ask her questions and not feel like they're going to be talked down to or yelled at. She's just like, yeah, of course, let me explain to you how to do that, which is super important in that role.
And also, you went to them. I mean, one of the great things I think that happened in Berklee over the past year, that Sarah, as kind of like the website of it, along with a writer, a media relations specialist, and a designer, undertook this whole project they were calling Telling Your Berklee Story, where they went department by department and first of all surveyed what their needs were for getting their stories out, and came up with a plan around it and a print piece, like some collateral, and then went back and went department by department and shared it. Like, it's establishing yourself and having them come to you, but you guys worked really aggressively. And now they've got so many people coming to them that it's overwhelming.
Yeah, but that's challenges.
No, but I think that's a very real challenge. If you get that much opt-in, you're going to have a lot more work to do.
Right.
Absolutely.
A lot of that was that people weren't aware of all the services and resources that our department does offer. And so once we educated them about all of that, they actually were excited. But now we have all this extra work. So I think, back to your original question, one of the challenges is trying to figure out how you can add additional resources, because you probably are going to create extra work for yourselves. So accounting for that and making sure that you're not getting everybody on board with what you do and then only remaining with the 3 people who you have to support it. So really thinking things through to the future and seeing what might come up.
Yeah, because they're probably thinking, oh my goodness, you can take all this off my plate. Here you go.
Exactly. And that is what we wanted them to do, but at the same time, it can be overwhelming.
Excellent. So with all of this, some of the things that you guys have spoken about, I mean, they're going back all the way to 2010. So what kind of timeline did this, it obviously wasn't overnight. So how long did this take? What kind of timelines did you put in place? Or were there any milestones of like, we want to get this done by this time?
Yeah, I mean, social
is, I think the thing about social is it's so ongoing. And we definitely hit different points. Like I said, we've been doing this since, 2008, 2009. I think our first brand organizer meeting, we didn't call it that at the time, was back in 2009. And it was maybe 5 big major Facebook accounts at Berklee. We had Facebook and Twitter, and it was kind of like, what are we doing here? It was Berklee College of Music, general summer programs, admissions, the Valencia campus, and enrollment, and online. I think just very few. And so for the next couple of years, it was all about pulling people into that meeting as we went about it. And it was around 2010, so 5 years ago now, that we published our first guidelines and best practices. It's always been something we come up with as a group, but that marketing kind of leads. Like, I think it ends up being kind of my role to go to the conferences, get kind of the general view of best practices, and other people, we're always all contributing it, but I do feel like it's something of almost my responsibility, because part of the point of the group is that we all end up experts in what we do. So we did the first guidelines best practices around 2010, and then around 2012 was when we gave it a name, the Berklee Social Media Network, and started that work in early 2012 on our social media strategy. I would say one of the first times it really got put to the test was when we had this new brand rollout over the course of this past year, that these guys will probably talk a bit more about. But what was great is the social piece of that happened really easily. We were launching, new logo, new design elements, all kinds of things. And the social media group was among the first groups to even know that this was happening and what it looked like. They knew early on, they knew a lot of iterations. About, I would say, 5 months before it happened, one of the designers came in and worked with us on what our social media favicons should look like in the new brand. And got feedback on how much do you guys want to match, how much do you want to have your own identity. And so that in mid-July, when the new website launched with the new brand, we all that day changed our favicons at the same day. And actually, I looked this up right before the meeting. That day, just by us changing, we didn't think about this. It was just kind of like, we'll do it all at once. But because we all changed our pictures, and that shows up in feeds, we generated like 10 times more traffic just to the homepage that day, just because everybody was saying, here's a new favicon and the new look on berklee.edu, but because it was such a concerted effort.
That's awesome. So if everyone at a university changes all of their profile pictures on the same day to a new style, you can have 10 times as many. That's amazing.
Well, I'm putting the link there too, because we talked about this. It was all very conscious. It's like, you're going to change to your favicon, and you're going to say, check out Berklee's new look and feel, and it was a new website, so there was a link to that. Yeah, and to be able to, that was a really cool moment for us to be able to do that way, and it was something we all knew about and had worked together on. That was very nice.
Yeah, that's brilliant. So. I think we're getting to the end of our time, and I'd like to thank you all three so much for your help. Do you have any additional tips that you'd like to throw out to us that are trying to make sure that we're getting our brands unified and all together?
I mean, I think the whole thing basically comes down to, if you're working together, you're getting so much more done. And so it comes down to taking the time and energy to actually commit to that. It can feel easier to be like, nope, I'm just going to do this and get it out of the way. I'm just going to shoot the email. It's like, here's what you do, not here's why. But if you get everybody together in a room and spend that time, you actually save so much time in the long run and make yourself so much more efficient.
And I think the idea of getting people at all levels in the rooms together is one of the things that we found a lot, because there's always a lot of kind of council level stuff happening where people are on board. But I think that's what's made a difference at us, and we are comparatively a smaller institution, and so I know that even at friends at bigger schools, that becomes exponentially more important the bigger the school gets, to have a representative from this school, from this college. And so that's why identifying those people, and they're often the same people, the same person who oversees some of the social, also is the content manager for their web section and in charge of some budget. It's often the same people, or they're closely aligned.
Yeah, I think with all of those people involved, they start to really take ownership in it. So, for example, our design team owns the logo. Other departments are not allowed to use the logo on their designs if they're designing them themselves. And a lot of people really get that, and they take it to heart. So if they see some rogue design, they'll actually send it to us. So, it's not just us with the iron fist. Everyone is kind of embracing it, and people feel involved, and I think that that's really important. So rather than seeing us as these kind of faraway, distant creatures, we're kind of more facilitators, and we're working with them. Yes, our job is primarily to focus on that, whereas for them it's just a part of their job description. But they're part of the team, and we're just kind of getting everybody together and conveying some of the information. But they feel like they're able to voice their opinions and actually have some say in the direction that everything goes in.
Wonderful. Well, you all have given me so many ideas, and I'm sure a lot of ideas to our viewers. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. You're all wonderful. And thank you always to our program sponsor, M. Stoner. And thanks to everyone who's tuned in today. Make sure to check out more shows from Higher Ed Pros on higheredlive.com. See you next time.
Thank you, guys.